Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Just a word of warning that there's some graphic information contained in this episode with reference to suicide. Episode 153, The Tent Maker. When I did the episode on Bernard Holtermann and discovered Henry Merlin and what an amazing set of photographs he took in the gold rush era in the 1870s, I came across a man called William Henry Arrowsmith and his wife Mary, and one of the negatives that was found in the Chatswood garage was a photo of them at Gulgong that became part of the Holtermann Collection. It's an amazingly clear photo for the era, and it shows William and his wife proudly standing out the front of their tent and flag making business. There's also another photo showing William and Mary and their little boy. So who was William Arrowsmith? Well, William Henry Arrowsmith was born on the 21st of December 1801 at South Shields, Durham, England, and he was baptised in St Helier on the Channel Island of Jersey. His father, William Arrowsmith, was born in Durham and was a boat builder at St Helier. His mother was Sophia Toshak, who was also born in Durham. Sophia was 11 years younger than William. William Jr. was the middle child of 5 and the only one to emigrate to Australia. In 1840, his father died at the age of only 39. The 1841 census shows William, Henry and his siblings living with their maternal grandparents at South Shields in Durham. In the 1851 census, William's now 17 and a sailmaker's apprentice, and he's living with his mother, Sophia, at South Shields in Durham. And it looks like from the census that there's about 5 families living at this address at the time, and it's said that Sophia keeps a small school in this census. In 1855, William, aged 23, was part of the crew on board the Light of the Age, sailing from London to Sydney, which arrived on the 14th of December 1855. His mother was to die only 2 years later in 1857. In 1860, William, at 29, was a sailmaker on board the Asia, and it sailed once again from London to Sydney and arrived on the 28th of April 1860, and this time he chooses to stay in Australia. William initially opened up a sail-making business at the Caledonia Wharf in Sydney, and he must have been doing quite well, as 4 years later, on the 5th of November 1864, it says, "Wanted an apprentice, W.H. Arrowsmith, sailmaker, Caledonia Wharf, King Street West." By 1867, William moved to Grenfell and opened up a tent and mattress making store. And in 1867 in Grenfell, there's a couple of advertisements for his business. Notice, we, the undersigned, have this day, by mutual consent, dissolved the partnership hitherto existing between the under name of Arrowsmith and Company. All outstanding accounts due to the firm will be received, and all debts paid by W.H. Arrowsmith, G. Riches and W.H. Arrowsmith. So he's gone out on his own on the 25th of October 1867. And then mattresses and palliases. A large assortment of every description in stock, tents, flies and water coolers, all sizes. W.H. Arrowsmith, opposite the Great Eastern Hotel in George Street. And that was an ad that was in December 1867. William married Mary Ann Corbett in Grenfell on the 20th of January 1868. He's listed as a sail and tent maker on the marriage certificate. And in 1868, a son, William Henry, is born in Queensland, followed in 1871 by a daughter, Mary Ann, in Orange. Mary Ann dies in Orange in the following year at only 1 year old. William and Mary lived in Gulgong till the early 1880s. William's premises was in Medley Street, Gulgong, and he also had a branch at Home Rule, which was 7 miles from Gulgong and the scene of a very prosperous gold mining venture. Photos of both premises are among the Holtermann Collection, which I'll add to the Facebook page that I referred to before. And Henry made up mattresses and tarpaulins, and the tarpaulins were the best brown navy canvas. William's name appears on a petition for the municipality of Gulgong, published in the New South Wales Government Gazette, dated the 6th of October 1873. William and his family went to Cootamundra around 1880, where he purchased a news agency. On the 24th of February 1883, Christchurch Sunday School says, there were also 3 prizes given by Mr. Arrowsmith to the class of boys, of which he was formerly teacher, scripture lessons being the subject of competition. And on the 13th of January 1883, sewing machine and piano depot. On Saturday last, a depot was opened by a local agent, Mr. Arrowsmith of Beale and Company, the colonial agents for the Wortham sewing machines and Habsburg pianos. These are sold on both cash and time payment terms, and the depot will afford the people of this and surrounding district the opportunity of securing these valuable household requirements. We would recommend readers to pay a visit of inspection to the depot next to Mr. O'Sullivan's in Wallandoon Street. And in the Cootamundra Herald on the 1st of September 1886, an ad, the undersigned wishes to inform the inhabitants of Cootamundra and district that is open to business in the following lines consisting of tobacco, fancy goods, stationery, fruit and confectionery, and wishes to merit a fair share of public patronage. WHA is also a local agent for Beale and Company, Sydney Morning Herald, Sydney Mail, Evening News, Town and Country Journal, Telegraph, Tribune, Bulletin, Globe, Illustrated Sydney News, Once a Week, Melbourne Age, Leader and Sportsman. The above-mentioned papers are delivered on immediate arrival of mail trains. W.H. Arrowsmith. And in the Cootamundra Herald on the 20th of December 1884, a notice, the undersigned has been appointed sole agent for the Evening News. Subscribers are respectfully informed that the above paper will be delivered daily, Sundays excepted, from this date. W.H. Arrowsmith, Cootamundra. And on the 20th of May 1899, Mr. W.H. Arrowsmith, now of Sydney, late inspector here, has been severely affected by blood poisoning as the result of a bite from a bat. He has slightly recovered, but occasionally suffers severely from it. William ran the news agency until 1887. He sold it, and then he settled his family into a home and went to the gold rush. He purchased a horse and sulky, came to Wyalong. Family stories have him walking back to Cootamundra, a very disappointed man. In 1889, the family left Cootamundra and settled at Rennie Street, Paddington in Sydney. Mary Ann died in 1908, and William Henry died in 1911 from injuries received after being knocked down by a cart. He was 79 years old. There was an article outlining his death that says Old Man's Death. An old man, William Henry Arrowsmith, lately living in Cascade Street, Paddington, died at St Vincent's Hospital last night from senility and heart failure. His presence in the hospital, however, was due to an accident which he met on Monday last. He was crossing Oxford Street near Regent Street, Paddington, when he was knocked down by a spring van, the horse attached to which was being driven at a walking pace. In his memoriam, loving memory of our dear father, William Henry Arrowsmith, who passed away on the 12th of April 1911. God saw father's footsteps faltered. He knew that his heart was weak, so he bade him rest for a season as the pathway had grown too steep. Inserted by his loving son and daughters, James, Etta and Carmaine, Fitzroy Street, Fitzroy, Victoria. And another memoriam, Arrowsmith, a tribute of love to the memory of our dear father, inserted by his loving daughters Nina, Clarice and Carmaine. William and Mary's children. The firstborn was William Henry Jr., known as Harry, was born in Brisbane, Queensland on the 13th of October 1868. In 1892, the licensing court at Cootamundra allowed him to obtain a hawker's licence. On the 4th of June 1898 in Sydney, it is hereby notified that Mr. William Henry Arrowsmith, telegraph operator of Junee, has resigned his position in the public service. And the reason why he had to resign his position was in 1898 at Bulleela in New South Wales, he was arrested for refusing to pay a railway fare. He was fined £1 or 7 days in jail. His description was 30 years old, 5 foot 11.5 inches tall, fair hair and grey eyes, and his occupation was a clerk. That might seem quite trivial, but he was sentenced 3 times in a little over 6 months. He married Martha Smith in 1921 in Sydney when he was 53 and Martha 38. On the 12th of May 1921, He was convicted as an accounting officer for misusing public monies at Emmaville. And the articles that relate to that, a married man named William Henry Arrowsmith, who's been on the staff of the Emmaville Post Office for the past 8 years, has been arrested and charged with misappropriation of certain sums of money aggregating to £94. Arrowsmith is senior postal assistant at the office, and during the recent absence on holiday of Mr. Windire, the postmaster, he acted in that capacity. It is understood that Arrowsmith was arrested as a result of admissions made by himself. He was before the police court at Emmaville this week and remanded until the next court. Bail was allowed with 2 sureties of £50. It says a smart, well-set man of middle age who stood up when the name of William Henry Arrowsmith was called was before Judge Armstrong in the Court of Sessions on Tuesday, charged with falsely misappropriating various sums of money, totalling £94 and 10 shillings, the property of the Postmaster General. The amount was to have been taken on a number of different dates, ranging as far back as the 15th of October last year, and 3 separate charges were laid. Arrowsmith, at the time of the trouble, was a postal assistant at the Emmaville office and entered a plea of guilty. Speaking for Arrowsmith, he said there was complete restitution, that he'd been 30 years in the service at the post office and he was recognised as a very capable and intelligent official. During the very serious outbreak of pneumonic influenza to Emmaville, he had rendered splendid service and a great deal of additional work devolved on him. This monial worry, it was contended, had conduced him to slip. To show that he was straightforward about things, however, he personally confessed to his wrongdoing to the postmaster, Mr. Windire. If he desired, so could easily have returned the money and said nothing about it. And this should stand in favour of the accused. Arrowsmith had a splendid record in every way, and under the circumstances he hoped the judge would see his way and clear him and give the benefit of the First Offenders Act. Judge Armstrong said that if Arrowsmith were in private employ, he would have had no hesitation about the matter, but he always felt diffidence in extending the privilege of the First Offenders Act to persons in the public service who were, particularly in positions of trust, handling public money. His lawyers said that he was not asking the judge to establish a precedent, but he could cite instances in which others were convicted of similar offences and been allowed the benefit of the Act. His lawyer then put Postal Inspector O'Connor in the witness box. His Honour had time to think the matter over and ultimately stated that he felt, in view of the precedents established, that he could grant the lawyer's request. Arrowsmith was then sentenced to 16 months imprisonment in Goulburn Jail on each charge, the sentences to be concurrent. The sentence was suspended, however, on entering into a requisite bond. So basically he was on a good behaviour bond for 18 months. Henry Jr. and Martha had a son and a daughter. On the 5th of February 1925, in the Mudgee Guardian and Northwestern Representative, an article that's titled Mudgee Man Attempts Suicide, Recovering from Wound. Mrs. William Arrowsmith came onto the veranda of the family home in Inglis Street on Monday afternoon and found her husband with a razor in his hand about to cut his throat. Before she could do anything to prevent him, he slashed his neck and cut into his windpipe. Mrs. Arrowsmith screamed and the neighbours soon gathered on the scene. All seemed so scared they did not know what to do. Eventually, Mrs. Arrowsmith took the razor from her husband's hands while he calmly surveyed the results of his rash act through a looking glass which he had with him. When Arrowsmith was conveyed to the hospital where Dr. Murphy attended to him, Arrowsmith said he was sorry for what he had done and wanted to live. He had been worried. Constable Ledwidge and Hughes, who attended the case when the call came, acted with splendid promptitude and direction. Arrowsmith was formerly in the postal service but lost his employment a few years ago. For a time he was a wardsman at the Mudgee Hospital, but lately has been doing casual jobs around the town. It is understood he was worried because of his inability to get regular work. He was well liked by the public during the years that he was in the telegraphic service in Mudgee and was equally well spoken of by those who knew him of late. The latest information is that Arrowsmith is recovering. However, unfortunately, 12 days later, William died in Mudgee and an inquest was held into his death, and it was hemorrhage from a wound in his throat willfully inflicted by himself. So, unfortunately for William and Mary, their firstborn son, really struggled and ended up committing suicide. Their second child, Mary Ann, was born in Orange in 1871 and died in Orange on the 5th of March 1872. Their third child, James Thomas, was born in Gulgong on the 27th of June 1873. In the Cootamundra Herald on the 31st of December 1884, so when he was 11, it says Master James Arrowsmith was elected as a new member of the shorthand class run in conjunction with the Literary and Debating Society Cootamundra. James married Harriet May Knight in East Melbourne on the 23rd of October 1900 when he was 27. They had 9 children and he was a policeman and they lived at North Fitzroy. James died in Melbourne on the 4th of August 1951 at the age of 78. Their fourth child, Charles Joseph, was born in Gulgong on the 26th of December 1875. By the time he was 25, he was living in Sydney and was a tram conductor. He married Jessie Matilda Elcock in Cootamundra on the 1st of September 1902. And it said that after they married in Cootamundra that they were going to be living in Waverley, a suburb of Sydney. They had 4 children. In 1908, he resigned as a tram driver and opened up a tailoring and costume mailing business in Goulburn Street, Sydney. In 1914, unfortunately, he had to file for bankruptcy and at the time was working as a labourer and then a storeman at the rail yards at Clyde in 1915. He retired from the railways in 1920. He wrote a book called The Curse in November 1921 and it went to a second publication the year after its release. He was then a district registrar of births, marriages and deaths, working from his home at Auburn. Jessie then took over the role after Charles's death on the 19th of February 1935 when he was 59. And it says that Charles was formerly a prominent worker in the Churches of Christ. Their fifth child, Ernest Toshak Arrowsmith, was born on the 20th of December 1878 at Gulgong. He was a railway officer and lived at Hurstville. He married Eunice Florence Robinson in Annandale in 1904 and they had 3 children. Eunice died in 1928. Ernest continued as a railway officer in Hurstville and then married Florence Harriet Dunlop in 1933. And Ernest died on the 29th of June 1951 at St George's Hospital, Hurstville, aged 72. Their sixth child, Nina Jane Arrowsmith, was born in Cootamundra on the 31st of August 1881. She married James Malcolm McIntyre on the 9th of September 1908 in Paddington, New South Wales at St Matthias Church. They had 2 children. James was a joiner. Nina died aged only 33 on the 4th of July 1916 at the Royal Hospital Paddington in childbirth, and their baby died at 7.5 months old in December 1916, and James remarried in 1920. Their 7th child, Clarice Eileen Arrowsmith, was born in Cootamundra on the 20th of January 1885. She married Frank Heatherset Kingsell in Paddington in 1915 when they were 30. They had 3 children with 2 surviving infancy and Frank was a teacher. In 1930, it says that Frank Kingsell, who's been a teacher at Newtown North High School for 16 years, has been transferred to Ulmarra as a headmaster. 5 years later, it said that he'd received his notification of his promotion as headmaster at the vocational school at Enmore in Sydney. And Mr Kingsell will be required to take super primary work and will be assisted by a specially selected staff, including a lecturer on psychology. Art and music will form part of the curriculum and a choir and orchestra to be established in connection with the school. Specially selected teachers will be appointed to these branches. They lived at Sydenham and Manly, and Clarice died at Manly on the 15th of June 1963 at the age of 78. And their youngest child, Carmane Mary Arrowsmith, was born in Cootamundra on the 11th of May 1889. She married Harold Farquhar Webster in 1913 in Paddington. Harold was a draftsman and they lived at Lane Cove. Carmane died in 1949 at Chatswood at the age of 60. So a couple with a young child that a photo got taken of back in the Gold Rush era had survived the test of time, and it was lovely to be able to tell this family story.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.